Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media. I'm Grant Abbott and today I'm going to give you the ultimate buyer's guide to graphics tablets, display tablets and so on. So this is an update of a previous video and I won't go through exactly what the differences between graphics tablets, display tablets, mobile tablets and so forth. That'll be up in the top corner. This video instead is my recommendations for graphics tablets in 2021. It's important to say that this video is not sponsored in any way. There are affiliated links in the description. If you click on them you'll be supporting me, but you don't have to. One thing that I did forget to mention last time was when do you need a graphics tablet? So if you're in any drawing program such as Photoshop, Critter, Clip Studio, whatever it is, you will need a graphics tablet in my opinion to draw. Yes, you can use a mouse. It will certainly take you a lot longer to produce the same results, and I don't think you can really get as good a result with a mouse in my opinion. It does make a difference if you're using things like Illustrator, which are vector based. You can use a mouse for that, that's no problem. It helps to have a graphics tablet, but it's really not as important as when you are actually just sketching. They do take a bit of time to get used to graphics tablets, so you've got to look up at the screen and not look down at your hand, and that takes about an hour to get used to. So yes, there is a sort of learning curve to it, but it is really quick and it will make a huge difference to you. In Blender or 3D modeling programs, texture painting and sculpting, certainly it helps a huge deal to have a graphics tablet. I would say you can't do it without, personally. Unless you are using things like stencils to paint with, then you can use a mouse and that's not a problem, or stencils to sculpt with even. You can use it for things like editing photos as well. I know a lot of people use Photoshop and they, when you're sketching on masks and things like that, sketching areas that you want to be brighter or darker or whatever it might be, then using a pen tablet again is really helpful and really useful to you. So is there any new technology that's available to us now that wasn't since the last video? Well, lots of tablets now have this ability to be plugged into mobile phones. The obvious limitation of that is that you've got a really small screen, so the screen size of your mobile phone, and then you've got this tablet and you're staring into this small screen. I think yes, it might work for students or people who really need to be portable but have sort of budget constraints, and most people have a phone, so you can get away with that. But I think it's a bit more gimmicky than anything. I haven't seen anybody use that, but maybe there are out there. Comment below if you know of people that do that. It's also worth saying that lots of the cheaper brands, which I'll talk about in a moment, they're now getting the laminated screens in their display tablets, which means the parallax is much less, so your drawing experience, you're much closer to the canvas, and that's quite nice. So I'll be talking about that a bit more later. So let's get on to my recommendations. Let's start with basic drawing tablets. Well, there's not much in it, if I'm honest. A Veeq, Huion, UG, Artazol, XP Pen, Gammon, Wacom, they all work well and they're all pretty good. When you're buying a tablet though, obviously a main consideration is the price, but always look out for, has it got pen pressure? So pen pressure above 2000, that's you won't really be able to tell the difference between 2000 and 8000 unless you're, in fact I can't, and I've been drawing for quite a while now, so I don't think you'll notice the difference either. And moving from one tablet to another, the bigger issues are things like what the pen feels like, and you won't notice that pen pressure difference in my opinion. Also make sure it hasn't got a rechargeable pen, one of those wires that you have to plug in every month or so. It's just a bit annoying. It's another thing to go wrong. Lots of people say they have problems with those wires after a few months or so. So just look out for those. Don't bother with them. Most tablets now have a pen that doesn't need charging. There does seem to be a bit of a difference in build quality though. I've got to say that Wacom, certainly the leading brand at the moment, their build quality is much more sturdy feeling than some of the other brands. Huion is another one that has very sort of rigid, good build quality by the looks of things, and others seem to lag behind a little bit, although I've not found any difference with the tablets that I've used. They've all lasted a reasonable amount of time, so I don't think it's something to worry about. But just for the feel of it, if you're worried and you're, let's say, portability is a big thing for you and moving around a lot, then you don't want something that's weaker build quality. Huion and Wacom are the most sturdy in my opinion. So what's my actual recommendation then? Well, Wacom is the leading brand, so you are going to get probably the best support with them in terms of the driver and compatibility. So they're probably at the top of the list for this one. They are the most expensive though. The cheapest is the One by Wacom, not the Wacom One, which is really confusing. Why you would name things almost the same like that, I don't know. But the One by Wacom, and if you need to find it, it's CTL dash, and usually that's the two different types in there, so CTL. But look up Wacom 1, CTL, and you'll find them. Roughly around £35 for the small one. Generally, I'd go for a bigger graphics tablet, so 6x4 I think is the small one, which is about this sort of size. I'd go a little bit bigger. Unless maybe space on your desk is important to you, then you might want to go for the smaller one, but the bigger one is a better drawing experience in my opinion. The smaller one is £35 and the bigger one is around £50, and that's similar in dollars as well. There are limitations to this sort of cheap Wacom version. If you want to go for the more expensive range, that's called the Intuos range, but the one by Wacom is the sort of cheaper version for students and so forth. It's pretty good, but there are limitations, so it doesn't have the same amount of pen pressure. Like I say, you probably won't notice the difference. It has no buttons on the side either, but I say they're pretty minimal things really, so I would recommend this one. Again, the most important thing to me, I would say, is this sort of compatibility, and Wacom seems to be the best for that. My favourite brand at the moment is the XP Pen because of those compatibility issues. They often have discounts and sales as well throughout the year, so it's a bit cheaper than the Wacom. It seems to have very good compatibility in drivers, maybe not as much support as the Wacom, but certainly the best out of the cheaper brands. It might not be quite as durable though, it doesn't seem quite as sturdy in terms of the build quality, but I would still thoroughly recommend it personally. Okay, so let's move on to display tablets. Well, here's where the compatibility issues becomes a big issue. There are big driver problems, it seems, with the cheaper brands. I've tested a lot of these and been sent a lot of them, UG, Artisol, Huion, XP Pen and so forth. And the only ones that I've found to work without problems are the XP Pen and the Wacom. All the other brands I've had difficulties with when it comes to drivers. And that's on both my new machine and my old machine, and I think it's something to do with more sort of high-end PCs, maybe even the graphics cards in them, because I have, generally speaking, quite high-end consumer graphics cards, so there might be compatibility issues there. You don't seem to get those same compatibilities when it comes to putting them on a Mac or a laptop, as I've passed them on to friends and they've not had problems in the same way I have. But for that reason, I would only recommend the Wacom and the XP Pen. It's not that I'm sponsored by them or anything, that's just my experience. Now there's big jumps in price and there's big differences in specification as you go up. The major thing you're looking out for is the parallax, as I've mentioned before, so the distance between pen and canvas, especially when you're going to the far corners with the bigger tablets, your angle that you're viewing your screen at will make a difference to the icon you're pressing in the corners. So just watch out for that. If you're going to go for a bigger tablet size, then I would suggest going up in terms of the price that you're paying to go for a laminated screen because they have less parallax. The other problems you might see with this is response rate, so when you're stroking across the screen with your pen, it might not be keeping up with you, especially some of the lower end brands, they tend to have a little bit more of this than the higher end. And lastly, minor issues like pen wobble and jitter as you're moving over and you're doing a fine line slowly, there might be a bit of wobble into that line. A lot of the time in the programs you have things like smooth stroke, or just adding a bit of the smooth stroke setting can kind of sort that out, and that's what it's kind of there for as well. The size of the display tablet as well is something you'll need to look out for, because a big tablet is obviously nice to use, but it does take up lots of space on your desk, and that is something to consider. You have to remember that you are kind of drawing onto the screen, so having space in front of that monitor is going to be important, and having the sort of stability in your desk and a nice stand and so forth is going to be important. So do consider the space that you're taking up. 16-inch seems to be the sort of happy size. I like to go for a screen that's a bit bigger than that personally, but for most people I imagine 16-inch is going to be a very comfortable drawing size for, like I say, most people to use. Now in terms of which brand to choose then, well, Wacom are certainly leading the way with their Cintiq Pro range, but they are extremely expensive. They have the nice laminated screen, and they have usually 4K screens, so the resolution is really nice. And that is another thing to bear in mind, the resolution of the screen is all important. The cheaper Cintiqs, so just the normal Cintiq 16 and 22, they only have an HD display, which isn't quite as nice, so if you're getting into that fine detail and you're looking at it all the time, then a higher resolution display does help. The Cintiq Pros offer that full 4K, whereas the other brands that are the sort of pro brands from Huion Canvas or the XP Pen, Pro brands this is, they offer the sort of halfway, so not 4K, but it's sort of like a 2K version. I can't remember, they have a special name for it, FHD or something like that. So it's a bit more than HD, which certainly makes a bit of a difference. Now those Cintiq 16 and the 22, the non-Pro, are £500 and £800, so they're quite high cost, and they're comparable to things like the XP Pen Pro versions and the Huion Canvas, their Pro version as well. But the specs aren't quite as good. You only get the HD display, you don't get the laminated screen with the Cintiq. So not as much resolution, and you've got a bit more parallax than you will with things like the XP Pen and the Huion Canvas. The good thing, of course, about the Wacom brand, the Cintiq range, is that you get that driver support and you know it's probably going to work with your equipment. So what would I recommend? Well, I would go for the XP Pen Innovator 16. It's a really nice piece of kit. It's got a good feel when you're using it, so no pen wobble or jitter, or very minimal anyway. It's got very minimal parallax as well, comparable to the Cintiq range. It's a 16-inch screen, which is a nice size. It's actually really thin, so it's portable as well, so if you're using it with something like a laptop, then this is probably the best bet as well. And it's a good price range for that specification. It's a similar price to the Wacom alternatives, those just non-Pro versions. So you're getting much more specification, but much less price. So the XP Pen Innovator 16 is my choice here. Now the cheapest display tablets you can get are around £250. XP Pen do a 12-inch version, and you can look out for deals there because sometimes it gets under £200, which I think is an absolute steal for a display tablet. Yes, it's their cheaper end, so you do get that bit more parallax, but it is nice to be working onto a screen rather than a graphics tablet and sort of looking up like this. I prefer it anyway. So that wraps it up there. Hopefully this is helpful to you. Do look in the description for updates, and I will answer questions in the description, those sort of frequently asked questions in the description to help you. Make sure you look at other people's comments as well, because they may have another experience and also be able to help. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helps.